The cabin lights of Meridian Air Flight MA379 were dimmed to a soft amber glow as the final rows of business-class passengers settled into their seats. Leather headrests whispered against shoulders, and the muffled hum of boarding announcements blended with the clink of coffee cups and the shuffle of magazines being tucked away. In row 4, Darnell Hayes, CEO of Meridian Air, paused mid-stride in the aisle, his polished Oxfords an inch from the carpeted floor. He'd heard something. Not the door chime, not the usual flight attendant greeting. A voice, warm, confident, unmistakably fluent, flowed through the rows. Mandarin. He'd been stationed in Shanghai for 2 years building partnerships. This voice was authentic, precise, full of the subtle tonal shifts that made it unmistakable. His breath caught. "Tell us where you're watching from." That question hung unspoken in the air. If you've ever heard a whisper in a crowded room, you know the power it can hold. This was that kind of whisper, except it carried across the aisle, across 2 rows, across his carefully managed world. Darnell turned his sharp gaze toward the front of the cabin. He spotted her immediately. A woman in a deep burgundy uniform, sleeves rolled to mid-forearm, standing beside the aisle cart. She was speaking, now in Spanish, to a passenger 2 seats over, her voice switching seamlessly from Mandarin to Spanish without missing a beat. A ripple went through the cabin as another passenger looked up, curiosity flickering in her eyes. He'd seen cabin cleaners hundreds of times, almost never noticed one. They were the silent ones, the ones who arrived after the last passenger deplaned and left before the first call button went off. But this woman, she wasn't silent. Darnell's pulse raced as he stepped closer, weaving past crisp white dress shirts and pressed slacks, drawn like a magnet to her presence. She wrapped up her Spanish, pivoted gracefully, and offered instructions in French to a gentleman near the bulkhead, her hand gesturing with effortless poise. He recognized French from a Brussels conference, again flawless. He closed the gap. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low but carrying. She turned, a flicker of surprise in her dark eyes that quickly settled into composure. "Yes, sir?" "That was Mandarin you just spoke," he began, unconsciously scanning her badge. "And Spanish, and French." She nodded. "Yes, sir." He cleared his throat, fighting the sudden lump in it. "May I ask, how many languages do you speak?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "9. 9. A single syllable, yet it sounded impossible, like hearing Mozart at a subway. A hush fell over the cabin as if the entire plane had stopped breathing for that moment. Darnell steadied himself against the back of a seat. "Would you mind showing me?" he asked, half-whisper. She gave a small, almost shy smile, an expression he'd never expected from someone commanding so much linguistic power. "Yes, sir." For a heartbeat, the cabin lights felt too bright. Conversation stuttered to silence. Flight attendants paused mid-step. Every single person turned, curiosity painted on every face. In this stretched thin bubble of plane air, she had become the center of gravity. The soft click of her heels on the carpeted aisle seemed loud. She glanced down for a split second, then lifted her head. "I'll start with Mandarin," she announced. 3 words, clear and resonant. "Ni hao, jage feiji shi wodejia." Heads tilted. Phones came up, screens lit. Then she switched effortlessly into Hindi, her accent natural. "Namaste, aap kaise ho?" She moved on to Spanish, her tone warm. "Buenos dias, ¿cómo puedo ayudarle?" French, German, Arabic, Portuguese, Italian, Swahili. 9 languages in under 60 seconds, each one perfectly pitched to the ear. By the time she finished, a collective gasp swept through the cabin. A woman in row 6 dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. A businessman at the front let out a low whistle. Darnell, his chest tight, felt tears prick the back of his eyelids. Tears of awe, and something deeper. Regret that he'd never noticed her before. He swallowed. "Thank you," he said, his voice husky. Then, softly, almost to himself. "Your name, please?" "Sofia Brooks," she replied, folding her hands in front of her. The flight attendants exchanged glances. Even the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "We're ready for pushback whenever everyone is seated." But here, in that first row of business class, nothing or no one mattered more than Sofia Brooks. Darnell nodded once, a small but deliberate gesture. He straightened his suit jacket, squared his shoulders, and walked on, already planning his next move. And the cabin? They were still talking about it long after their cups of coffee had gone cold. They'd seen something extraordinary. Brilliance dressed in a uniform, hiding in plain sight. That morning, Sofia Brooks was just another cabin cleaner. In 3 minutes, she became the reason a CEO would rewrite a $280 million budget, and the reason this entire flight would never forget her name. Sofia Brooks arrived at the front of the plane 30 minutes before passengers began boarding. The cabin lights were still bright white, the carpet freshly vacuumed, and every seatbelt neatly folded across the armrests. She carried her cleaning cart, a quiet, well-worn companion, down the aisle, methodically wiping tray tables, straightening pillows, and checking for stray napkins. Every motion was precise, almost ritualistic, a silent testament to the pride she took in a job most people overlooked. She'd worked for Millionaire for 5 years, always on the night shift. By the time she finished cleaning one flight, she headed straight to her small apartment near Dallas-Fort Worth International. Quick shower, a cup of reheated coffee, and off to pick up her daughter from after-school care. 4 hours of sleep, then back to the airport. Repeat. No one ever noticed her. Not the pilots who skimmed by on their way to the cockpit. Not the flight attendants adjusting their makeup in the galley mirror. Not even the baggage handlers wheeling luggage through the door. When she pushed her cart past the gate desk, agents merely glanced at her badge, nodded without eye contact, then returned to their screens. She'd become part of the background, like the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Sofia moved down the aisle of business class, her eyes cast low, scanning for fingerprints on the armrests. She thought of windowsills polished just an hour ago, now streaked with tiny smudges. A quick spray, a microfiber cloth, and the glass shone again. In her mind, she took pride in restoring order, making things fresh for the next set of travelers, though they would never know her name, nor appreciate the quiet care behind every swipe. She had chosen this work when life asked her to make a sacrifice. She'd been on track for a master's in linguistics at Kent State, drinking long hours of coffee in library stacks, immersing herself in phonetics and syntax. But when her mother fell ill, Sofia left school to care for her. 6 months later, her father passed away from a stroke. Suddenly, her dream of translation and diplomacy felt like a luxury. She took any job she could get: grocery stores, nursing homes, temp agencies. At last, a janitorial supervisor at Millionaire offered her night hours that fit around her daughter's school schedule. It was cleaning or nothing, and Sofia needed to feed both her daughter's lunches and her own determination to keep learning. Her apartment smelled faintly of lemon-scented disinfectant late at night, a reminder of the world she left behind. In the cramped kitchen, textbooks on Mandarin, French, and Arabic sat stacked next to a battered school bag. She read a page here, listened to a recording there, between spills of coffee and lulls in airplane traffic. She practiced pronunciation softly into her phone's recorder, playing them back until her accent felt sharper than the jet stream outside. But down here, inside the cabin, she was just a cleaner. No certificate, no diplomacy, just a uniform and a name tag that said Sofia. She reached row 8, where she replaced a drooping headrest cover. Her fingers brushed a printed itinerary someone had tucked into the seat pocket. Meetings in Sao Paulo, Frankfurt, Dubai. She imagined speaking fluent Portuguese to the board members on assignment, easing misunderstandings, building bridges with the right words. In those moments, her heart ached for the life she could have had. A life in which she wore a tailored blazer instead of a burgundy jumpsuit. A life in which her words carried weight. She straightened up and folded her arms. letting herself feel the weight of the cart's wheels beneath her palms. Tonight, like every other night, she would finish her work, clock out, and walk back to that apartment alone. She would rehearse her lines, 9 languages in perfect sequence, and remind herself that her mind was a treasure trove, even if the world didn't see it yet. A hush settled over the cabin as the fasten seatbelt sign flickered on. Sofia paused by the exit row, observing the passengers trickle in. A businesswoman tapping on her smartphone, a retired couple sharing a Kindle, a teenager engrossed in a game console. No one noticed what Sofia noticed: the subtle crease in one man's forehead, the loneliness in another's gaze, the exhaustion on a mother's face as she wrestled with 2 carry-ons. She imagined the conversations she could have guided. In Mandarin, she'd say the exact phrase to calm a nervous flyer. In Spanish, she'd joke with a family about their vacation plans. In French, she'd compliment a wine choice before takeoff. 9 lifetimes of culture and communication resided inside her, yet no one had ever asked. A young flight attendant slid past her cart, heavy makeup perfectly applied. He glanced at Sofia, muttered a quick, "Thanks," then kept walking. She gave a small nod, smiling just barely. That tiny acknowledgement, unnoticed by everyone else, was the closest she came to connection on a nightly basis. She cleaned the last of the seatback screens and wheeled her cart toward the rear galley. The flight attendants were stowing luggage when she passed. Their chatter resumed: work schedules, upcoming days off. Sofia caught a snippet. "I've got tickets to the game this weekend," someone said, laughter bubbling. They didn't mention language classes or startling conversations with CEOs. They didn't notice anything beyond their own routines. Sofia pushed her cart down the final aisle, pausing when she heard a soft chime signaling that boarding was complete. She stepped aside and stood at attention, cart braced, ready for the next phase, keeping this cabin pristine for the hours of flight ahead. In 2 rows, something extraordinary was stirring, an invisible web of possibility. For Sofia, tonight wasn't just another shift. It was another chance to practice her 9 languages in her head, another step closer to being found, to being seen. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself. No one knew who she was. Yet, and as she resumed her tasks, smoothing a blanket across a seat, she carried with her a quiet determination. One day, someone would hear her voice and realize that brilliance had been right there in the aisle all along. The cabin had barely settled after Sofia's stunning demonstration when Lucas Miller appeared at the end of the aisle, his uniform crisp and his expression tight with irritation. He'd watched her speak 9 languages as though witnessing an alien landing, his pride pricked, his authority challenged. He approached Sofia's cleaning cart with a determined stride, the soft click of his shoes amplified by the sudden hush among passengers. Sofia was stowing her cloth and spray bottle, cheeks still flushed from the applause. She glanced up as Lucas reached out and yanked the headset from around her neck, the cord snapping taut. The small device clattered to the floor and skidded under a seat. "Look at you," Lucas snarled, voice low but venomous. "Thinking you're some kind of hero because you can say a few fancy words?" He jabbed a finger at her chest. "You're a cleaner, not a diplomat. Stick to your lane." The cabin froze. A mother clutching her infant pressed a hand to her mouth. Businessmen paused mid-swipe on tablets. Even the flight attendants, trained for turbulence, inhaled sharply. No one moved. Sofia's heart hammered in her chest. She swallowed, mouth dry, and looked up at Lucas with wide, startled eyes. In every seat, passengers leaned forward, watching this confrontation like a private spectacle. Lucas leaned even closer so that his polished name tag gleamed under the overhead lights. He sneered in Mandarin first. "你以为你了不起，是吧？你不过是个清洁工." Then switched to Spanish, loud enough for nearby rows. "Hablas como profesora, pero limpias el suelo como tú siempre has hecho." Finally, in French, his voice dripping contempt. "Rien d'autre qu'une femme de ménage, quelle blague." 3 lines, 3 languages, each one a blow that landed with sickening precision. The cabin held its breath as Sofia's eyes filled. Her fingers clenched around the handle of her cart, knuckles white. Darnell Hayes, seated just 2 rows back, felt a surge of anger hotter than any he'd known on the trading floor. He pressed his palms into the armrests, taking in every detail. The slick sarcasm in Lucas's tone, the flush of shame on Sofia's face, the way passengers shifted their weight uneasily. Lucas straightened, stepping back as though he'd merely delivered a polite correction. "Don't confuse courtesy with respect," he added in English, loud enough for all to hear. Then he turned on his heel and strode away, leaving an echo of hostility in his wake. Sofia stood rooted to the spot, chest tight, mind whirling. The headset lay forgotten under the seat. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them back, pride and pain battling behind her calm exterior. She inhaled, exhaled, and reached down to retrieve the headset, looping it back around her neck with trembling fingers. A sharp ache blossomed around her ear where Lucas had yanked. She touched the spot gingerly, wincing at a faint sting, but she would not crumble. Not here, not now. Darnell rose from his seat. He stepped forward into the aisle, clearing his throat to draw attention. "Lucas," he called, voice firm. Heads turned. He waited until Lucas paused by the beverage cart. "Mind coming back here for a moment?" Lucas looked surprised. No one had ever summoned him mid-flight, but he turned. "Sir?" he replied, feigning politeness. "Right here," Darnell said, gesturing to the front of the cabin. Lucas walked back, forced to navigate past stunned passengers. Sofia watched him approach, tension coiling in the space between them. Darnell stood tall, gaze fixed on Lucas's uniform pin. "I overheard your commentary," he said softly. Then his tone sharpened. "Here's a reminder. This is someone you've consistently overlooked for 5 years, until she proved you wrong." Lucas's face paled. He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. The cabin was so quiet you could hear the jet engines humming overhead. Darnell turned and looked at Sofia. "Are you all right?" She met his eyes, chest heaving with emotion. "I am," she said in a voice that trembled with restrained hurt. Then, to Lucas, "I'm fine, thank you." Without another word, Darnell reached into his jacket pocket, withdrew a small microphone transmitter, and clipped it to Sofia's lapel. "Folks," he said, voice echoing through the PA system, "we just witnessed unfair treatment. Sofia Brooks has spoken 9 languages to serve our passengers, languages you may never hear on any other flight." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Sofia's breath caught. "But she's also one of our hardest workers," Darnell continued. "It's time to see people for their talents, not their titles." He returned the headset to Sofia, voice gentle. "You're needed up here." Sofia swallowed, head lifting as shock gave way to determination. She stepped forward, cradling the headset like a lifeline. The overhead sign glowed, seatbelts fastened, but she barely noticed. All eyes were on her. Darnell's calm defiance had shifted the cabin's energy from despair to solidarity. A ripple of applause began, soft at first, then building into a chorus that washed away Lucas's insults. Sofia's lips trembled, then curved into a grateful smile. When the clapping subsided, Darnell offered Sofia an outstretched hand. "Shall we continue where we left off?" She placed her hand in his, nodding. As she spoke the first words of her Mandarin introduction once more, the cabin leaned in, united by the power of her voice. In that moment, Sofia Brooks was no longer invisible. She was the pulse of the cabin, seen, heard, and finally respected. And Lucas Miller, for the first time, realized that the uniform does not define the person wearing it, and that sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones you least expect. Sofia pulled the cleaning cart into the empty galley and paused, fingertips brushing the aluminum countertop as her chest tightened with leftover embarrassment. The hush of the cabin still rang in her ears, the way every eye had fixed on her. The way Lucas Miller's sneer had cut through her confidence. She wiped a swirling fingerprint from the stainless steel door of the beverage fridge, but her hands trembled too much for it to disappear entirely. A soft click of polished Oxfords on carpet made her look up. Darnell Hayes stood in the aisle, hand tucked casually into his navy blazer pocket, eyes warm but serious. He held out a business card, cream stock with the Millionaire logo embossed in black. "Sofia Brooks," he said, voice low enough for only her to hear. "May I steal you for a minute?" Her throat constricted. She managed a nod, swiping her cloth across her palm to dry it, then followed him through the curtain into first class. The moment the curtain swished shut, the world shifted. The low hum of passengers faded to distant background noise. He led her to an empty pair of leather seats facing each other, the ones reserved for VIPs. The overhead reading lamps cast a soft pool of light, highlighting the gleam in his eyes. "Have a seat," he invited, motioning to the cushion. Sofia settled in, clutching the armrests like a lifeline. Darnell perched on the edge of the opposite seat, leaning forward. "I want to apologize on behalf of our crew," he began. "Lucas's behavior was unacceptable." Sofia sank a fraction lower. "Thank you," she whispered. His gaze didn't waver. "But I also want to do more than apologize." He paused, unfolding the business card. "I'd like to offer you a position at Millionaire, Global Cultural Advisor." Her heart skipped. "Pardon?" He smiled gently, as though helping her find the right words. "You've demonstrated skills we desperately need. My team and I want you to help build and lead our new Voice Inside program, training staff in cross-cultural communication, developing partnerships, even traveling on select flights as our in-house liaison." Her breath caught in her chest. The card felt too heavy in his hand, an anchor of reality she couldn't yet grasp. "You'd have an office," he continued, "a salary of $150,000 a year, healthcare benefits, and a budget of $280 million to fund the program's growth across our worldwide routes." He watched her face flicker through shock, excitement, and something darker, doubt. Sofia closed her eyes for a moment. 4 years ago, she'd given up her scholarship, her master's degree, everything that promised a pulpit of respect and status. She'd chosen the cleaning night shift because it fit her daughter's school schedule, and because nobody else offered her a chance. What if I fail?" Her voice trembled. "I've never sat behind a desk. I don't have a degree. I've only ever worn this uniform." She brushed the edge of her sleeve as though it were a scar. Darnell leaned back, steepling his fingers. "I've been where you are. I came up through smaller regional carriers, often the only person of color in the room, sometimes the only person who graduated from a community college. They overlooked me. I worked in logistics for over 20 years before anyone noticed." He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a sleek black pen. "I don't care about your paperwork. I care about what you can do." He slid the business card across the armrest. "If you accept, this is yours. Spend tonight thinking about it. I'll find you wherever you are, galley, cleaning closet, wherever. I want you on my team." Sofia stared at the card, her name in elegant typeface, her title printed boldly beneath it. She swallowed hard, the initials SB, etched like a promise she'd never dared to dream. After a long moment, she looked up at Darnell. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, tears of fear and longing and a touch of hope. "I thank you," she said softly, voice steadying. "This means more than you know." He gave her a nod that felt like a benediction. "You deserve to have your talent recognized." They sat in silence for a beat, two people from different worlds finally seeing each other. Behind the curtain, the cabin lights glowed, and muffled voices whispered about the evening's surprise. Sofia tucked the card into her pocket. "May I ask one more question?" she ventured. "Anything," he replied. "How do I start?" Darnell smiled, a grin that creased the corners of his eyes. "We'll begin tomorrow. I'll have HR reach out to schedule a meeting with our legal and training teams. Tonight, just be proud." She nodded, an unfamiliar warmth blooming in her chest. "I will." He stood, offering a hand to help her up. Sofia took it, and for the first time in a long while, she felt solid beneath her feet, like she belonged. Back in the galley, the curtain fluttered open behind them. Sofia paused, clutching her cleaning cloth as though it were a keepsake. Passengers in first class gave her polite nods, curiosity dancing in their eyes. But this time, she wasn't invisible. As she wheeled her cart back to business class, she felt the weight of possibility pressing gently on her, a reminder that sometimes the greatest leaps begin when someone sees you for who you truly are. Her uniform felt different now, not a shroud, but a reminder of how far she'd come. And somewhere above the clouds, Sofia Brooks was no longer just a cleaner. She was an advisor in waiting, carrying the promise of a new beginning, one she might just be brave enough to grasp. The cabin lights glowed softly as the in-flight entertainment screens flickered to life, displaying the Meridian Air logo and a Wi-Fi connected banner. Darnell Hayes, seated in the front row of business class, tapped his tablet with purpose. Moments earlier, his assistant had buzzed him via the seat-to-seat messaging system. A video conference with key catering partners in Mumbai was going live in 5 minutes, and their interpreter had just canceled. Passengers around them chatted quietly, unaware of the looming crisis. A cluster of executives traveling to negotiate a multi-million-dollar expansion of Meridian's gourmet meal service were gathered around a rugged conference tablet set on a fold-out tray. On the screen, 3 Indian executives sat in a glass-walled lounge at the Taj Mumbai, waiting. Darnell took a breath and stood. "Sofia," he called, voice calm but urgent. She was brushing a stray crumb from a seatback pocket 2 rows back. Her cart stood ready beside her, spray bottle in hand. She glanced up, eyes widening at the sight of her name on his tablet. "Could you help me?" Her heart skipped. The memory of Lucas's public humiliation still stung, but something steadied her, a growing certainty that this was her moment. She nodded, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Yes, sir." Darnell guided her to the front of the cabin, where the conference tablet sat propped on the bulkhead tray. The first Indian executive cleared his throat. "Good afternoon, Mr. Hayes. We were told there would be an interpreter." Sofia swallowed and offered her hand. "Hello, I'm Sofia Brooks," she said in flawless Hindi, voice warm. "I'm here to assist." A pause, then the executive's eyes lit up. "Wonderful to meet you, Sofia. Shall we begin?" Darnell returned to his seat, watching every detail. As the executives launched into discussion, prices, regional sourcing, culinary themes, Sofia leaned into the microphone. She translated rapidly from English to Hindi, then carefully back to English, weaving in tonal nuances and cultural context. She didn't just convert words, she bridged mindsets. Passengers glanced up as her voice flowed. "हमारी टीम तैयार है आपके स्वाद और गुणवत्ता मानकों को पूरा करने के लिए." Our team is committed to meeting your taste and quality standards. A ripple of relief passed over the executives. One of them smiled and nodded, launching into a question about spice blends. Sofia shifted seamlessly to communicate intricate details about cardamom ratios and marination times. Behind her, Darnell exhaled, impressed. This wasn't a polished boardroom with teleprompters. This was a metal tube at 30,000 feet, with a spotty connection and the scrutiny of an entire cabin. Yet Sofia navigated it like a seasoned diplomat. As the conversation pivoted to contractual terms, payment schedules, delivery logistics, Sofia switched into English with the same clarity. They'd like a 45-day payment window, structured against delivery milestones. She watched the head of procurement lean forward, studying her. "Excellent," he said in English. "Your clarity makes this so much easier." Sofia's chest swelled with a quiet pride. For years, she'd practiced alone, replaying recordings in her tiny apartment kitchen, imagining moments like this. Now it was real, and she was delivering. The final executive raised a hand on screen. Before we conclude, one question. How will Meridian ensure consistency across diverse routes, from Delhi to Dubai? Without hesitation, Sofia responded in Hindi. हम एक केंद्रीकृत प्रशिक्षण मॉड्यूल विकसित कर रहे हैं, जिसमें स्थानीय टेस्टिंग और गुणवत्ता नियंत्रण शामिल हैं. We are developing a centralized training module that includes local testing and quality controls. Darnell felt a surge of excitement. He tapped twice on his tablet, logging the finalized terms. The executives nodded in approval and broke into smiles. Thank you, Sofia, the lead negotiator said, voice warm. You've been invaluable. As the conference ended, the tablet screen winked off and the cabin lights brightened. The executives exchanged handshakes and relieved laughter. A flight attendant approached, quietly congratulating Sofia. That was incredible. Thank you. Passengers nearby offered smiles and nods, recognition at last. Sofia allowed herself a small smile in return, her hands still trembling slightly. She stepped back behind the curtain and exhaled, leaning against a wall panel. Darnell joined her, eyes bright. That was brilliant, he said quietly. You just secured a $280 million catering expansion deal in 2 languages. Sofia blinked, the words echoing in her mind. I just did my job, she replied, a hint of surprise in her tone. He shook his head, a proud smile tugging at his lips. That's exactly why I'm making you my global cultural advisor. You turned a near disaster into a triumph, mid-air. Her heart fluttered with disbelief and hope. The painful memories of Lucas's taunts felt further away now. She straightened, letting the weight of the cart lift from her shoulders. Thank you, she said, voice steady but soft. Darnell nodded and stepped back into first class. Sofia resumed her duties with renewed confidence. Each spray of disinfectant, each cloth swipe, now felt infused with purpose. She wasn't just cleaning. She was laying the groundwork for a new era at Meridian Air. The cabin hummed with quiet energy. Passengers settled in, whispering about the unexpected spectacle. Above the low roar of the engines, Sofia's steady footsteps marked her transformation. From invisible caretaker to indispensable bridge between cultures. And somewhere above the clouds, Sofia Brooks knew she'd never be overlooked again. The moment Sofia's final Hindi phrase faded, the cabin held its breath. Then, as if on cue, a ripple of recognition swept through the rows. Soft gasps, startled glances, a few passengers leaning forward in their seats. It was as though they just witnessed a private performance. And now they realized they were all part of the audience. A woman 2 rows back leaned toward her husband and whispered, That's the most brilliant thing I've ever heard on a plane. He nodded, eyes wide, swallowing a laugh of astonishment. Nearby, a businessman closed his laptop and sat up straight, wiping his palm against his thigh as if to dry his own clammy reaction. Even the flight attendants paused, hands mid-air, struck silent by the display of raw talent. Darnell Hayes, seated in row 1, caught Sofia's eye and offered a small, proud nod. She returned it with a tentative smile, cheeks still pink from adrenaline. For a moment, she just stood there in the aisle, letting it sink in. Passengers were seeing her work and her worth for the first time. One of the Indian executives from the Mumbai conference pressed a finger to his lips, then turned to his companions. We should record this, he murmured, pulling out his phone. The soft glow of screens popped up across the cabin as people captured the moment. Soon, voice inside wouldn't just be an internal program. It would be trending on social media faster than the flight tracker on their phones. A flight attendant with a tray of sparkling water stepped forward. Sofia, can I get you something? She asked, genuine awe in her voice. Sofia shook her head, her throat too tight to speak. Instead, she touched the bracelet on her wrist, a simple silver band engraved with her daughter's name, and felt a surge of warmth. Darnell stood and raised his hand. Folks, if I may. His voice carried easily through the PA system without requiring a microphone. The cabin settled again, like a theater going quiet before the encore. "I know many of you just boarded thinking this would be an ordinary flight," he began, smiling around at the rows of faces. "But what we've witnessed here is extraordinary. A woman you've all passed 100 times, working quietly behind the scenes, has just spoken 9 languages for you, without so much as a second thought." A low murmur of agreement drifted back. Someone called out, "Thank you, Sofia." A few seats away, a teenager waved both hands, as if leading a cheer. Even Lucas Miller, the cabin crew chief, stood motionless. No sneer, no dismissal, just stunned. Darnell's expression softened. "Let's give Sofia a round of applause, not just for what she did, but for reminding us that talent doesn't come with a title." He clapped, and the cabin erupted in an enthusiastic standing ovation. Passengers rose, chairs scraping softly. Applause echoing beneath the overhead bins. A handful wiped at their eyes. Others laughed with relief and joy. It felt like catharsis. Sofia closed her eyes briefly, letting the sound wash over her. In that applause, she heard something she'd yearned for. Recognition. Not pity, not charity. Respect. She raised her hand in a shy wave, tears pricking at her eyelashes. A man in the back row caught her eye and mouthed, "You rock." She mouthed back, "Thank you," voice unspoken but felt. As the clapping subsided, Darnell held up his phone. "Some of you are already streaming this," he said with a grin. "If you're watching later, drop a comment. Tell us where you're watching from, and share a time when someone underestimated you, but you proved them wrong." His words weren't an awkward invitation. They felt genuine, an extension of the moment's spirit. A hush lingered as he continued. "Let's make sure this isn't a one-time moment. We're launching Voice Inside, a program to discover hidden talents across our teams, and Sofia here will be leading it. I hope you'll help us spread the word." Passengers leaned back, energized. A flight attendant called out, "Who's excited to see what's next?" Someone cheered. "We are." The cabin felt alive with possibility, united by this shared experience. Behind the scenes, Sofia picked up her cleaning cart once more, but it wasn't the same cart. It felt lighter, almost buoyant. She rolled it past seats, still humming with conversation, pausing only to smile at a small child who waved shyly. The child's mother mouthed, "Amazing," and Sofia nodded, blinking back emotion. In the galley, Lucas Miller hovered by the beverage fridge, no longer sneering but silent, perhaps reconsidering everything he thought he knew. Sofia stepped around him, ready to resume her work. But this time, she did so under a different light, not invisible, but undeniably present. As the plane reached cruising altitude, the captain's calm voice crackled over the PA. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're cruising at 35,000 feet. Enjoy your flight." It was routine, but tonight, it felt like an anthem to possibility. Sofia leaned against the cart, exhaling quietly. She glanced at Darnell, who caught her eye and gave a quick thumbs up. In the reflective sheen of the overhead bin, she saw her own face, brighter than she'd ever remembered. For once, she wasn't just a cleaner. She was the moment that changed a flight, a company, and maybe even a few lives. Whether you're watching this live or catching up later, remember Sofia's story. You never know who next to you holds the power to surprise, to bridge worlds, to command a room, or in this case a cabin, with nothing but the strength of their voice. If you've ever felt unseen, share that in the comments. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person to truly see you, and that's when everything changes. And as the hum of the engines carried them across the sky, Sofia Brooks wheeled her cart with steady purpose, ready for whatever came next. The cabin lights simmered to a warm glow as the hum of conversation settled into a curious murmur. Darnell Hayes stood in the aisle, the weight of every gaze bearing down on him. The curtain to first class fluttered behind him, a quiet reminder of where he belonged, and more importantly, where Sofia had been hidden. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced the slim microphone transmitter, clipping it to his lapel with a deliberate click. The overhead PA system crackled, and then Darnell's voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention." A hush fell like a velvet curtain. Passengers straightened in their seats. Even the flight attendants paused mid-step. Lucas Miller, the cabin crew chief, halted by the service cart, his arms folded defensively. Sofia Brooks stood beside Darnell, her pulse echoing in her ears, heart thumping against her sternum. "I want to address what just happened," Darnell continued, eyes sweeping across rows of business-class seats. "You witnessed Sofia speak 9 languages with grace and precision, languages that connect us to cultures around the world." He paused, letting the applause build for a single electric beat. Then his tone shifted, calm but resolute. "Effective immediately, I'm freezing our $280 million global catering expansion budget." Murmurs rippled through the cabin. You could almost see the numbers dancing in the air. $280 million paused in mid-flight. He pressed on. "That money will now fund a new initiative called Voice Inside, designed to discover and support hidden talent across Meridian Air, from the galley to the cockpit." A bright smile flickered across his face as he turned to Sofia. "And I'm honored to announce Sofia Brooks as our first global cultural advisor." The cabin erupted. A woman in the back row let out a whoop. A man down the aisle raised both hands in celebration. A few passengers stood, applauding so vigorously that cups rattled on tray tables. In that moment, the plane felt more like a theater than an aircraft, the audience united by an unexpected encore. Sofia's eyes glistened. She placed a trembling hand over her heart, tears spilling down her cheeks. She looked to Darnell, who gave her a reassuring nod, and then to the cabin, where dozens of strangers were now her biggest fans. Lucas Miller's face had drained of color. He opened his mouth as though to protest, but no words came. The applause was too loud, too sincere. Finally, he stepped aside, shoulders slumped, forced to watch as the woman he'd belittled became the star. A hush fell again, this time one of shared wonder. Darnell lowered the mic and spoke softly, just to Sofia. "You've changed everything." She swallowed, voice catching. "Thank you, sir." He turned back to the passengers. "If you're watching this live or catching up later, drop a comment. Tell us where you're watching from and who in your life deserves to be seen for their true talents." His words felt natural, a genuine invitation rather than a forced engagement. A ripple of laughter and agreement moved through the cabin. A gentleman 5 rows back tapped his phone screen twice and whispered, "Done." The teenager near the window seat typed furiously, their face lit by the screen's glow. Behind Darnell, flight attendants exchanged proud glances. One handed Sofia a bottle of water, another discreetly offered tissues. They'd been part of this transformation and understood its significance. As the applause tapered into soft cheers and humbled smiles, Darnell stepped forward once more. "Sofia, please, if you'd like to say a few words?" Her breath hitched, but she took a steadying inhale. She glanced at Darnell, then at the cabin that had just witnessed her rebirth. "Thank you," she began, voice steady but warm. "I never imagined standing here in front of all of you, let alone leading something like Voice Inside. I've spent years believing I could be overlooked, just another cleaner doing her job. But tonight you've shown me differently." She let that sink in, eyes damp. "If anyone out there feels unseen or underestimated, remember this. Your worth isn't defined by your title. Your talents deserve a stage." A fresh wave of applause washed over her. Sofia offered a small, grateful smile, then took a step back. Darnell reattached the microphone to his own lapel. "That's our Voice Inside promise," he said. "To listen, to lift up, and to never let brilliance go unnoticed, whether it's dressed in a blazer or a uniform." As the cabin lights returned to their pre-takeoff glow, the aisle felt charged with new energy. Passengers leaned back in their seats, some wiping tears, others exchanging knowing looks. In that quiet buzz, You could almost hear the engines purr with approval. Sofia reclaimed her cart, but with a different stride. Taller, more assured. She paused to lock eyes with Lucas, who offered her a muted nod of respect. She nodded back, a quiet peace settling over her. Darnell watched her go, pride and satisfaction radiating from his smile. He leaned back, tapped his tablet, and jotted a note. Implement voice inside, day 1. For everyone on flight MA379, nothing would ever feel routine again. And somewhere above the clouds, a new chapter for Millionaire and for Sofia Brooks had just begun. Sofia Brooks stood by the galley curtain, heart thudding like the engines outside. Earlier, she'd felt invisible, just another face in a uniform. Now, every eye in the cabin was on her. The applause had settled to appreciative murmurs, but the electric energy remained, humming through the overhead bins and down the aisles. Darnell Hayes stepped into view, his expression calm but resolute. In his hand was a polished nameplate, brushed steel, black letters. Sofia Brooks, Global Cultural Advisor. The title felt surreal as he approached. Passengers craned their necks, eager for the next moment in this unexpected mid-air drama. He clipped the nameplate to Sofia's lapel herself, his fingers steady. "I want you and everyone here to see this," he said softly, voice caring enough that even travelers in coach could hear if they pressed closer. "This is who you are now." A ripple of excitement spread through business class. A woman near the window leaned over to her partner. "That's your name now," she whispered, her dawn equal parts awe and affection. The partners of executives leaned forward from their pods, murmuring congratulations. Lucas Miller, the cabin crew chief, stood frozen by the beverage cart, hands clenched at his sides. No sneer this time, just thin-lipped surprise, followed by a grudging respect. Darnell met his eye and nodded subtly. An attendant stepped forward, discreetly escorting Lucas toward the back of the plane. "Sir, please follow me," she said, voice neutral. Lucas gave one last startled look at Sofia before obeying, lips pressed into a tight line. As Lucas receded, any lingering tension dissolved. The cabin exhaled together. Relief, vindication, and uplift, all wrapped into one collective breath. Passengers settled back into their seats, but their eyes kept drifting to Sofia. She felt a soft warmth in her chest, an ember of pride kindling into a steady flame. Darnell turned back to the cabin. "This isn't just a badge," he said, lifting his arm so everyone could see her new title. "It's a promise to recognize talent wherever it hides, to lift people up rather than keep them small." His words struck a chord. Heads nodded around the cabin, and a few hands rose in quiet agreement. Sofia swallowed and raised her hand in a small wave. Tears glinted in her eyes, but her smile was strong. She managed, "Thank you," voice clear and unwavering. "I won't let you down." The applause that followed was immediate and heartfelt. It wasn't the polite clap of a bored crowd. It was the applause of people who had witnessed a transformation. A man in a tailored suit banged his seat back gently. A woman by the aisle who had initially dismissed Sofia's uniform let out a whoop of encouragement. Even in coach, you could hear shouts of "Congratulations!" and "You earned it!" filtering forward. Off to the side, an elderly passenger dabbed a handkerchief at her eyes. When Sofia caught her glance, the woman mouthed, "You inspire me," a gesture that brought fresh tears to Sofia's cheeks. As the cabin settled into a low hum of conversations about leadership, opportunity, and second chances, Sofia felt something shift within her. The uniform she'd worn like armor now felt like a reminder of where she'd been and where she was going. Darnell stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We'll have a formal transition plan," he said, eyes warm. "But tonight, remember this moment." She nodded, pressing a fingertip to the nameplate. "I will," she replied, her voice catching with emotion. Behind them, a flight attendant passed out glasses of sparkling water. "On the house," she explained. Passengers sipped and toasted. and Sofia found herself raised a glass by a group of interns who had been marveling at her earlier performance. They waved her over, asking questions about her new role, eager for advice. Her answers were thoughtful, encouraging. She realized she was already stepping into the advisor she was about to become. Nearby, the first-class lounge monitors flickered with the flight tracker and safety information. A quick swipe revealed a social media feed capturing the moment. #voice inside. Sofia Brooks. Trending in the digital cabin. The world beyond their 3 feet of aisle was watching now too. Sofia caught sight of Lucas again at the back, adjusting his uniform and checking his reflection in the service door. Their eyes briefly met, hers not with triumph, but with compassion. She gave a small nod, acknowledging him as a colleague rather than an adversary. He bowed his head once, and in that gesture, she forgave him. A gentle chime sounded. Seatbelt signs off. Passengers craned forward, eager to get their cameras, to capture one more image of the woman who'd rewritten the script of their flight. But Sofia didn't mind. She moved through the cabin with quiet confidence, greeting passengers by name when she could, asking how they were enjoying the flight, her new title glowing on her lapel. As the plane hummed toward cruising altitude, Sofia took a moment by the bulkhead window. The patchwork of clouds stretched below, dawn's first light tipping their edges in gold. She pressed a hand to the cool wall, letting the enormity of the sky remind her of the possibilities ahead. In that silence, she heard Darnell's voice behind her. "Welcome aboard, Global Cultural Advisor." She turned, smiled, and for the first time, truly believed it. Above the world, at 35,000 feet, a nameplate had changed a life, and the cabin had witnessed it all. And somewhere in that cabin full of witnesses, each passenger was quietly asking themselves, if brilliance can hide in a uniform, what hidden talents might I be missing? The cabin's soft lighting felt almost intimate as Darnell Hayes settled into the seat beside Sofia Brooks. The voice inside announcement had landed, applause had faded, and now, above the clouds, there was space for something deeper. Her story. Sofia tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and took a breath, as if summoning years of memories into one moment. Darnell offered a reassuring smile. "Whenever you're ready," he said quietly. Sofia nodded, hands clasped in her lap. "I guess it starts in Ohio." She spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "I was born in Toledo. My mom was a nurse's aide. My dad worked pipes at the steel mill. They didn't have much money, but they had a rule. Education was everything." Darnell listened, eyes soft. Around them, passengers pretended not to overhear, but in hushed voices, a few leaned forward, curious. "My parents scraped together tuition for me to attend Kent State on a full scholarship," Sofia continued. "I majored in linguistics. I lived in the library, devouring textbooks in Mandarin and French. I had a plan to become a professional translator, maybe work at the UN, help build understanding between cultures." She paused, swallowing. "Then my mom got sick. Cancer. I was halfway through my master's program when she couldn't get out of bed. I came home to take care of her. 6 months later, my dad died of a stroke. Everything fell apart." Her voice caught as she glanced out the window at the endless sky. "I had my daughter to think about. I couldn't leave her with strangers while I chased a degree, so I packed up my dreams and took the first job I could find. Cleaning floors at grocery stores, nursing homes. Eventually, night shifts at Millionaire." Darnell reached over and gently covered her hand. "I'm so sorry," he said. "That must have been overwhelming." Sofia exhaled, relief and sorrow mingling. "It was, but I kept learning in secret. Borrowed library books, downloaded audio lessons, Mandarin at midnight, Arabic at 2 a.m. Sometimes I thought I'd go crazy from exhaustion, but every time I felt worthless, I'd remind myself, knowledge is power, and it's mine, whether anyone sees it or not." A flight attendant passed quietly, refilling water glasses, giving them a respectful nod. No one interrupted. Even the hum of the engine seemed to pause in solidarity. Darnell nodded slowly. "You didn't let life define you," he said. "You defined your life." She leaned back, eyes shining. "That's how I survived. But it also meant living in the shadows, afraid if anyone knew they'd fire me, say I was overqualified or a liability. So I stayed quiet, even when I could have spoken up." He studied her profile. "And today, you found your voice." Sofia's lips curved into a small, bittersweet smile. "I did, but I want people to understand why I waited so long. It wasn't humility, it was fear. Fear that if I stepped out of line, I'd lose everything." Darnell's expression softened with empathy. "What you did took courage, from knowing your worth, even when others saw you as insignificant." She looked at him, vulnerability tempered by quiet strength. "My daughter, she's 7 now. She knows I clean airplanes. I tell her I'm helping people get home. But I'm scared she'll think your job doesn't matter. I want her to see me as more than mom who cleans. I want her to dream bigger." A hush settled around them. A passenger in row 5 dabbed at her eye with a tissue. Another whispered to her companion, "That's real strength." Sofia swallowed hard, gaze drifting to the aisle. "When I was introduced as Global Cultural Advisor, I felt like I finally stood for something more. But I also felt the weight of that title, because I know how many people don't get that chance." Darnell nodded thoughtfully. "That's exactly why Voice Inside will matter. You'll give others that chance." She exhaled, relief flooding her features. "I want to help people like me, talented, overlooked, to build a program where no one has to hide their gifts." Darnell offered a hand, palm up. "Then let's start now." She placed her hand in his, sealing a partnership born in the sky. Behind them, the cabin lights shimmered as passengers stole glances, witness to this heartfelt exchange. Outside, the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the clouds gold. Sofia watched it, thinking of her parents, of late-night study sessions, of her daughter's proud smile when they FaceTimed after an 18-hour shift. She felt a warmth in her chest, a promise of new beginnings. "Tell us where you're watching from?" Darnell's playful suggestion felt right here, in this shared moment. Sofia turned to the window where a businessman sat, phone in hand, and found his eyes. He nodded, silently committing to the question. Sofia smiled at Darnell, then faced him. "My story isn't just mine anymore," she said softly. "It's for everyone who's ever been silenced." He squeezed her hand. "And together, we'll make sure they're heard." As the seatbelt sign faded and passengers settled in for dinner service, Sofia Brooks leaned back, no longer carrying the weight of unspoken words. In her lap lay the business card with her new title, and in her heart burned the determination to honor her past by empowering others. Above the clouds, on flight MA379, an invisible caretaker had finally unfolded her truth, and in doing so, unlocked the next chapter for herself and countless others. And for those of you watching, remember, sometimes the greatest voices come from the quietest corners. Don't be afraid to unmute your story. It had been a month since flight MA379 made headlines, and the ripples of Sofia's moment had grown into waves through every hallway at Meridian Air's headquarters. On a crisp morning in early November, employees gathered outside the company's main training lounge, once the Global Learning Suite, now officially christened the Voice Inside House. A simple brass plaque covered the old name, its polished surface reflecting a burgeoning sense of pride. Darnell Hayes stood before the assembled crowd, line managers, interns, cabin crew, even a few surprised members of the accounting team, his usual calm confidence tempered by genuine excitement. He gave a quick nod to Sofia Brooks, who stood by his side in business attire that still clung to hints of her burgundy uniform's legacy. When he spoke, his voice carried the warmth of someone who still couldn't believe how far she'd come. "Today," he began, "we officially open the Voice Inside House, a place where hidden talents are discovered, cultivated, and celebrated. This room won't just host our training sessions, it will be the heart of a culture that values every voice. Applause rippled through the crowd. Sofia watched as a few younger employees snapped photos, while others exchanged knowing smiles. Many of them had already participated in the soft launch pilot workshops, but this official ceremony made it real. A week earlier, Darnell had sent a company-wide email that landed in inboxes like a gift. Subject: Meet our first global cultural advisor and launch of Voice Inside from Darnell Hayes, CEO, to all Meridian Air staff body. On October 23rd, Sofia Brooks, one of our dedicated cabin cleaners, spoke 9 languages mid-flight to bridge a critical gap in communication. Since then, Sofia has been promoted to Global Cultural Advisor, and I've tasked her with leading Voice Inside, our new program to unlock hidden potential across every department. Please join me tomorrow at 10 a.m. in the Voice Inside House for our inaugural workshop. Nominate a colleague whose talents deserve recognition. In the days that followed, the email became the talk of every department. In marketing, Slack channels buzzed with messages like #voice. Inside, #find your Sofia. And, did you see Sofia's story on LinkedIn? In customer service, agents traded anecdotes about how multilingual housekeepers or adaptable baggage handlers could tailor service for international travelers. In finance, whispers circulated about reallocating small training budgets to fund language scholarships and cultural mentorships. On launch day, Sofia arrived early to arrange name tents and materials, branded notebooks inscribed with Voice Inside, Discover, Develop, Deliver. A stack of multilingual glossaries and a globe at the front of the room. As participants trickled in, she greeted each by name. Anxious faces eased when she asked them where they'd like to begin. A baggage handler mentioned unrecognized coding skills. A gate agent confessed to homegrown social media strategy. An accountant revealed proficiency in Japanese for corporate finance reports. Sofia penned each onto the Wall of Hidden Voices, a corkboard ready to display the program's first nominations. Darnell stood at the back, arms crossed in approval, as the workshop buzzed with genuine energy. He caught sight of Lucas Miller leaning against the doorframe. Lucas offered a tentative thumbs up, a silent truce born of respect. A few rows over, the teenager who'd cheered on the flight raised her camera to capture the moment. She and an intern planned to vlog about how a plane cleaner inspired their own career shifts. When it was time to speak, Sofia stepped forward. Under the soft spotlights of the Voice Inside house, she shared her story again. This time, not from behind a cleaning cart, but from a podium flanked by flags representing key language markets. She spoke about sacrifice, perseverance, and the silence that too often cloaks talent. Then she invited participants to nominate peers, to mentor them, to give them space to speak up. Tears shimmered in a few eyes, both her own and those of employees who recognized their own struggles in her journey. A senior flight attendant, known for her strict schedules, approached Sofia afterward. In a hushed voice, she admitted she'd once studied advanced Spanish but set it aside for night shifts. "I want to help with translation for our Latin America roots," she said. Sofia smiled, squeezing her hand. "That's exactly what Voice Inside is for." By midday, the Wall of Hidden Voices was filled with sticky notes. Cooks fluent in Mandarin, mechanics with coding certificates, interns who volunteered as grief counselors for passengers. Each note represented someone who'd previously hesitated to speak up. Darnell surveyed the board, then tapped his phone. Within minutes, an internal newsletter hit inboxes. Profiles of the first 10 nominees, invitations to skill-sharing sessions, and details on a new scholarship fund seeded by that $280 million reallocation. Throughout the afternoon, participants rotated through breakout rooms, one dedicated to language and culture exchange, another to skills showcase events, and a third for leadership mentoring circles. Sofia moved among them, listening, encouraging, connecting dots between skills and opportunities. Every once in a while, she glanced at the plaque outside, the emblem of a new era. By closing time, the Voice Inside House felt more like a community hub than a corporate training room. Employees lingered over coffee, swapping stories about unconscious biases they'd faced or inflicted, and plotting ways to bring Voice Inside to their own teams. Engineering, in-flight entertainment, even airport security. A systems analyst joked about building an app to track hidden talents across global hubs. HR pledged to embed Voice Inside in onboarding materials. As the crowd dispersed, Darnell and Sofia stayed behind. He poured 2 glasses of sparkling water from the refill station. "Look how far we've come," he said, raising his glass. Sofia studied the empty seats and the well-worn floor tiles. "I never imagined this would become so big," she admitted, voice soft with awe. His grin warmed the room. "This is just the beginning. Next quarter, we'll pilot Voice Inside chapters in our Dubai and Sao Paulo offices. Then we expand to partners and vendors." She sipped, savoring both the water and the promise. "I could never have done this alone." He shook his head. "It started with you, but it's powered by all of us." Sofia set her glass down and looked at the plaque once more. "I'll never forget where I came from," she said. "But now, I know where I'm going." Darnell nodded. "To every corner of the globe, and to every quiet corner of this company." As they left the Voice Inside House together, employees filed in for evening workshops, naming colleagues they'd discovered, friends who'd helped build this new culture. And somewhere on the other side of the corporate campus, interns were mapping out the next newsletter article: How Meridian Air Found the Power of Unseen Voices. If you've ever felt invisible in your workplace, or wondered how to spark change, remember Sofia's story and ask yourself, whose talent have you overlooked? Because sometimes, the most extraordinary voices rise from the quietest places, and all it takes is one platform to set them free. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, just the kind of calm before the next wave of passengers poured through the gates. Sofia Brooks navigated the lower corridors, her Voice Inside badge catching the fluorescent lights. She was on her way to meet a regional manager for lunch, but her mind lingered on the ripple effect she'd helped create. As she passed gate C-17, she spotted a figure at the end of the hallway, a young man in a dark blue janitor's uniform, carefully mopping a stretch of tile. He worked with such concentration, headphones in, a faint beat humming against his chest, that he didn't notice the small crowd of passengers streaming past. They sidestepped him, avoiding eye contact, as though the mop and bucket rendered him invisible. Sofia paused. She remembered what it felt like to be unseen. 5 years ago, she would have glanced away too, afraid of drawing attention. But not today. She took a steadying breath and approached. "Hey," she called softly, stopping a few feet away. The janitor startled, his mop arm jerking mid-swipe. He pulled out one earbud and blinked. "Sorry," Sofia said, offering a warm smile. "I didn't mean to scare you. I'm Sofia Brooks." He tilted his head, eyes flicking to her badge. "I know who you are," he said quietly. "Global Cultural Advisor, right? From Meridian?" She nodded. "That's me." She gestured to his equipment. "I see you here every weekend. You do great work." He swallowed, bashfulness washing over his face. "Thanks," he mumbled. "I've been here 3 years. I guess people don't notice that, you know?" Sofia leaned against the wall, folding her arms. "They notice now," she replied. "And if I can help make sure they keep noticing, I will." His shoulders straightened. He set the mop handle against the wall and pushed the bucket aside. You do that?" "Absolutely," Sofia said without hesitation. "You ever have any skills, languages, maybe technical stuff that no one's asked about? I want to hear them." The janitor, whose name tag read Carlos Reyes, rummaged in his pocket and produced a folded slip of paper. I sing. Classical. Operatic, actually. My mom used to take me to auditions when I was a kid. I auditioned for a conservatory, but I had bills to pay." His voice caught. "Now I sing in church choir on Sundays, but that's it." Sofia's face lit up. Carlos, that's amazing. I run a program called Voice Inside. It's all about discovering hidden talents across Meridian. I'd love for you to join our next open mic event at headquarters. You could sing for everyone. His mouth parted in surprise. Headquarters? Open mic? For employees? For any crew member, she said. I'll introduce you. You'll have the stage, the mic, everything. He looked down at his mop and then back at her. I don't know. Public speaking scares me more than singing. Everyone's nervous at first, Sofia assured him. Trust me, you'll be in good company, and I'll be right there by your side. Carlos hesitated, then nodded. Okay, I'll do it. Relief and excitement mingled on his face, and Sofia felt a familiar flutter of pride. This was why she'd fought so hard, to open doors for people like him whose brilliance had been hidden for too long. She checked her watch. I have to run, but I'll send you the details. And Carlos, thank you for trusting me. He smiled broadly. Thank you. As Sofia walked away, she felt the corridor's weight lift. The airport buzzed on around her. Families reunited, business travelers on the move. But she carried with her a quiet certainty. One person's recognition could spark a chain reaction. Later that evening, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Just weeks ago, she'd been the one gathering courage to speak 9 languages in a confined cabin. Now she was the one amplifying others' voices. The transformation felt almost surreal, but as she reviewed her messages from aspiring Voice Inside nominees, technology whizzes, artists, linguists, mentors, she knew the program was only getting started. Back at her modest apartment near the airport, Sofia settled into her favorite armchair and opened her laptop. A new folder in her inbox read, Voice Inside, Open Mic, April 15th. She clicked through details. Stage reservation, audio equipment, promotional materials. A list of 4 confirmed performers glowed on screen. At the top was Carlos Reyes. She thought of his quiet passion for opera, the tremor in his voice when he admitted he'd given up his dreams. She opened a fresh document. Carlos Reyes, Opera Recital. Under it, she typed a plan. Meet at headquarters next Monday for stage orientation. Provide vocal coach session from our partner network. Arrange for translation as interview content to share his story. Reserve wrap-up Q&A with CEO and audience. She hesitated, then added a line at the bottom. Note to self. Arrange for small celebration after performance. Champagne and applause. Sofia leaned back, a contented smile spreading across her face. She rubbed the worn bracelet on her wrist, her daughter's name etched inside, feeling gratitude for the journey they'd been on together. The Voice Inside house had become a beacon for talent. Now it was time to take its message beyond the walls of corporate training. The next morning, Sofia arrived at Meridian Air headquarters just as the sun lit the facade in soft gold. She bypassed the main lobby and headed straight for the Voice Inside house. Inside, the air was electric. Sticky notes adorned the wall of hidden voices. Staff chatted about upcoming workshops. Interns set up name tags and equipment. Darnell caught her eye and gave a nod of approval. Ready for Carlos? He asked. Sofia grinned. More than ever. Later that afternoon, she escorted Carlos into the intimate rehearsal room, where a grand piano and microphone stood against a backdrop of posters celebrating Voice Inside alumni. He looked around in awe. This is incredible, he breathed. She offered a reassuring smile. This is your moment. He closed his eyes and took a breath, then unfolded the sheet music he'd brought. As the pianist played the opening chord of Puccini's Nessun Dorma, Carlos lifted his head. His voice, a rich tenor, filled the room, carrying every nuance of longing and hope. Sofia watched as he lost himself in the music. No uniform, no mop bucket, just a man embracing his gift. When he finished, the room was hushed for a heartbeat before erupting into applause. Carlos's eyes glistened as he bowed. Sofia stepped forward and clasped his hand. You were magnificent. Carlos exhaled, a laugh of relief and joy escaping him. Thank you, Sofia. Darnell entered with a small group of executives and HR representatives. They surrounded Carlos, offering accolades, job offers in communications, invitations to training panels. Sofia observed from the side, chest swelling with pride. She'd sparked this moment. Now she watched others carry it forward. That evening, back in her apartment, Sofia sat by the window looking at the runway lights blinking in the distance. Her phone buzzed. A message from Carlos. "My daughter watched me sing today. Thank you for giving me back my voice, Carlos." She typed back, "Tell her you're her hero. Proud of you." She set the phone aside and closed her eyes, thinking of the countless others still waiting for a chance. Her journey had begun with fear and silence. It had blossomed into empowerment and community. Voice Inside was no longer just a program. It was a movement. Before bed, she opened her laptop and drafted a final note for the week's Voice Inside newsletter. Who are you overlooking today? It might be the person sweeping the floor, filing the reports, or stacking inventory. Look beyond the uniform. Ask one question. What else can you do? You never know which hidden talent will change everything. She hit send and let out a contented sigh. In the quiet of her small living room, Sofia Brooks reflected on the miles and moments she'd traveled. From silent cabins to corporate ceremonies, from hidden fears to bold declarations. Her story had come full circle, and now it was up to all of them, her colleagues, her company, and every viewer, to keep the circle growing. Because brilliance could wear any uniform, and justice, recognition, and opportunity belong to those courageous enough to speak their truth, and to those wise enough to listen. Tell us where you're watching from, and who in your life you've overlooked. Share your story in the comments, and let's make sure every voice is heard.